Hey guys, welcome again to the channel. So today we're going to be making this Milkmaid inspired corset top. This is super easy to make and it's definitely beginner friendly. So if it's something you'd like to know how to make, please stick around and let's get started. So here are the materials that will be needed to make this top. You're going to need an open end zipper, an underwire for the cups, a cotton or polyester lining, then your fabric. You're going to need about 1.5 to 2 yards of fabric. We'll also be needing some bias tape, an elastic thread, and about 1/2 inch width of elastic. Now to get the right size of the underwire that we'll use for the cups, you make sure it sits right under your bust like so. So here are the tools I'll be using to make this pattern. Because this pattern is a crop top, I'll be using half of my basic bodice block. So that's basically from my shoulder to my waistline. Now I'm going to start by first measuring the depth of my neckline. So from the neck point, I'm going to measure 8 inches, which is about 20.25 centimeters. Now that measurement fell right on my chest line. So next I'm just going to extend it to the back. Next I'm going to mark the width of the dot on the chest line and move it to the side. So the width on this pattern was 1 inch, so I basically just moved that 1 inch to the side like so. Also to reduce the back width by 1 inch and also bring the armhole down with about 1/2 inch. So next I'm going to go ahead and connect those points. Next I'll be marking my underbust measurement, which was 14.25 inch in this case, the same as 36.25 centimeters. Now when I'm making anything that has to do with cups, I always like to take about 2 cm or 3/4 inch from the underbust measurement. So measuring from the neck point, my new underbust length is 13.5 inches, which is the same as 34.25 centimeters. So to mark out my cups, I'm going to be using my underwire. I'm going to place my underwire in the center of the underbust like so, and next I'm going to lower the neckline to match that of the underwire. So measuring from the base of my neckline, I marked 6.5 inches, which fell on the bust line. And from that point, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch for the center gap. So from that point, I'm going to place my underwire back like so in the center of the underbust, and I'm basically just going to mark around it. Now once I get to the underbust, I'm going to make sure to skip whatever dot allowance that is there. So I'll basically move my underwire away from the dots and then continue like so. Now I'm just going to extend that line further to make the chest line. So here the bodice for this design is pretty much done. The next thing to do is to prepare the cups. Now to get the width of the cups, we're going to measure from the side of the bust to the center. Make sure you take the tape over on the fullest part of your bust to the center of your bust, like so. So for my bust width, I had 10 inches, which was about 25.5 centimeters. Next, I'm going to get a separate piece of paper and fold into 4. Now once folded, I'm going to go ahead and measure around using half of the cup width, which was 5 inches. Then I'm going to add an extra 1/2 inch for the seam allowance. So keeping my tape at the folded tip, I'm just going to go ahead and take that measurement around to get a circle. So once I've gotten my circle, the next thing I'm going to measure will be the length of my cup. Now to get my cup length, I'm just going to measure from my chest line to my underbust. So here in this case, I got 5.5 inches, same as 14 cm. Next, I'm going to mark it on the circle, but in this case, I'm going to mark 6 inches, leaving 1/2 inch for my seam allowance. So above that line, I'm going to mark an extra 1 inch. Now this will be the allowance for the little ruching detail on top of the cup. So I'm going to cut through. So here's an idea of how it's going to look once attached. We're going to have some extra room for the little gather details around the cup and also ruching detail on top of the cups. So now I'm just going to go ahead and cut out my pattern along the style line that we've just marked, like so. So along the center back of my back pattern, I'm just going to include my zip allowance and mark like so. So here I'm just labeling out the pattern, marking the parts where I'll be including my seam allowance when I'm cutting. So I'm going to go ahead and close the dot on the waistline. Also close the dot on the back part of the pattern. So next I'm just going to lay out my pattern pieces on the fabric and cut out. So towards the side top corners of my cups, I added about 1/2 inch just to blend it out to make it look like a full semicircle. Next I cut my lining and also a layer of interfacing. For the cups, I only cut the lining, I didn't cut a layer of interfacing. Mostly because I didn't want it to feel too bulky around the bust, because it already has a gather detail. So here are all my pattern pieces already cut out. At this point I've already ironed on the interfacing, so next I'm just making sure I put all my notches in the right place so that I know where each point is at. So before heading to the sewing machine, I'm just going to go ahead and lay my lining to the fabric, pin them properly in place, and be ready to sew. So here I'll be starting with the cups. So first I'm just going to basically join the lining to the top using 1/2 inch and also do a top stitch. Next I'm going to flip it over to the wrong side again and then sew out that 1 inch to the point where I notched, like so. Next I'm going to make a notch right around that point where I finished sewing, but not too close to the seam. And basically repeat the same to the other side. Next, I'm going to turn it inside out and give it a good press. So to achieve the gathers around the cups, I'm going to run 2 rows of basting stitch around it like so. Next, I'm going to pull both threads from the top and basically pull to form my gathers. Now you want to pull carefully so the threads don't break. Now one tip I use is I always leave both ends of my basting stitch open, so in case one side breaks, I can continue from the other side. Now once I've gotten my desired gathered length, I'm just going to compare it to the measurement around on the bust to make sure it matches. Next, I'm going to lock my basting stitch basically by just pulling the thread on the side of the bobbin. So here I was just giving it a quick look to see how it'll turn out, and it's looking pretty good so far. Next, I'm going to sew on a tunnel on the top part of the cup. Now this is where I'll be passing the straps in through on the center front of the cup. So I'm going to mark that 1 inch out, and next I'm just going to sew it down like so. I'll also repeat this on the second cup. So here I've cut out my straps. I made it 1 1/4 inch wide. So here I'm stitching it down and I'm just using about 1/4 inch as my seam allowance. Now to turn my straps, I'm going to be using this loop turner that I got on Amazon. So basically I'm going to make a little notch right at the top of the strap like so. Next I'm going to pass the turner inside the straps, push it all the way to the top till it gets to that part where I notched. Now once I've gotten to that point, I'm just going to clip it in like so, make sure the fabric is enclosed, and then I pull down gradually until my straps is turned out. Now once my straps are turned, I'm just going to give that a good press. Now to pass the straps through the tunnel, I'm going to use a safety pin, dip it in like so, and then push it in from the side of the cups towards the center front of the cups, like so. Now once the strap is through, I'm just going to go ahead and seal the end towards the side seam, like so. So here the cups are all done. Here is the final look of the cup. So moving on to the back of the neck, I'm going to face the neckline with 1/2 inch and then do a top stitch. So here both the necklines for the back and the front part of the top is already done. I've ironed my seams out flat. Next thing to do is to attach the cups to the underbust on the front. So the part where the straps are coming out through will be placed towards the center front like so. Now make sure the strap sits right on top of the neckline. Do not pin it with the seam allowance. So once the cups are pinned in place, I'll be using my 1/2 inch bias tape to face around the underbust. If you don't have a bias tape, you can also make a bias by using your fabric, just by cutting on a diagonal grain. I'll be leaving about 1/2 inch of the bias out, and I'm going to just sew around like so. So I'm just going to trim off a little off of my seam allowance so that when I lay my bias tape over, none of the seam will poke out. Now to finish the casing, I'm going to fold that 1/2 inch I left up like so, and then just stitch it down. Now towards the end of the seam, I'm also going to fold the bias down like I did in the beginning, and just finish off the seams. So the cups are all in, and this is what it's looking like so far. So at this point, I've already joined the side seams using 1 inch as my allowance. So basically, I attached the lining to the lining and fabric to the fabric like so. So with this drawstring detail on top of the cups, you're able to tie as loosely or as tightly as you'd like. The next thing to do is to finish the hem of the top. Now to do this, I'll first trim out the excess of the lining and then fold my fabric over like so, basically folding from the wrong side to the right side. So here I'm just tucking it in and then pinning in place. Now once all pinned out, I'm going to go ahead and sew it out with 1/2 inch. So here I've already sewn it out. The next thing to do is to turn it inside out, like so. Now once turned out, I'm going to do a top stitch on the bottom part like so. So at this point, I've done my top stitch and I've also ironed out my seams at the bottom. So next I'm going to be inserting my underwire inside the casing around the underbust. Sometimes the casing might not fit all the way around the underbust, but you want to make sure you first insert it towards the CF and then it can end anywhere on the sides. For uneven underwires, you're going to make sure the shorter part sits towards the center front. So at this point, my underwires are already in. Next, I'm just going to pin the side where the underwire ended because I'll be doing like a back stitch around there just to hold it in place. Next, we're going to be cutting out the sleeves. To cut my sleeve, I placed my fabric on fold. So I made the length of my sleeve 28 inches because I wanted it to extend beyond my waistline to about my mid-hand. and measured 15 inches as the width. So to mark out the armhole, I'm going to measure around the armhole of the top. So here in this case, I had about 6 inches. I'm going to add 1 inch extra to that, which I'll later use as my seam allowance. Next, I drew a curve to match the 4 inch around the armhole. Below the armhole, I'm going to measure 5 inches. Now this is the point where I want my smocking to be. Also, from the bottom of the sleeve, I'm going to measure 5 inches up and notch that point for the smocking detail. Next, I'm going to go ahead and turn the top of the sleeve with about ½ inches and also turn the bottom with about ½ inch. So here I used a bias tape because my fabric did have a little bit of stretch to it. The bias helps to stabilize that. Also make sure the seam at the top is wide enough to fit an ½ inch elastic. So to achieve the smocking detail, I'm going to be using an elastic thread. So I'm going to go ahead and wind some elastic thread around my bobbin. To achieve the perfect smock, you're going to push your fabric towards the seam while sewing. On both the top and the bottom part of the sleeve, I'll be doing 3 lines of smocking. So here my smocking is already done. The next thing to do is to close the side seam of the sleeves. Once I get my desired length, I'm just going to go ahead and stitch the elastic. So at this point, both my sleeves are done. The next thing to do is to attach it to the top. So here I'm just going to pin, making sure the armhole seams match, and then sew it down using ½ inch. Now once the sleeves are sewn in, I'm just going to tack that point where I marked where my underwire ended. So basically I'm just going to stitch that point down so that the underwire is not able to move around over time. So after putting the sleeves in, the next thing I did was install the zipper, of which I did that off camera. So at this point it's pretty much done. This is what it's looking like, and here's what it looks like at the back with the zipper. So here's one final look. This is how it looked like on me. This turned out so cute and I love the fit, I love the sleeve. This is how it looks from the back. So let me know what you guys think in the comment. I really enjoyed making this tutorial and I hope you guys enjoyed watching it too. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I'll see you in my next video. Bye!